Hey famous warrior, welcome back to our channel. Today I have the honor, the privilege, all the things of having on the set here with me my good friend, my counselor, my advisor, she wears all the hats basically. Yes, she wears all the hats, and she's here to share her story. She's here to share her experience and her expertise in a very interesting topic that we have to share with you guys today. So I'm excited that I have Naomi Mpamba here with us today, and we really hope that this will be an exciting, juicy conversation for you guys. Yes, and okay, Naomi, thank you so much for making the time to be here, for coming, not just for showing up, but for coming to speak on this topic that many people would think is sensitive. I appreciate you being here because I know that you already have your plate full. You wear so many hats.
Yes.
And the hat that has brought you here today is the hat of being a pre-marital counselor. Yes. But before we dive into that and your perspective on sexual intimacy as a premarital counselor, tell us about yourself in 5 sentences. Let the people know a bit about who you are and why this conversation is going to be interesting and cool and fun and informative.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Louise. It's such a great honor and pleasure. So like you said, my name is Naomi Mpamba.
Yes.
Piri is my maiden name.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a mother of 3,
Yes.
a wife, of course, to 1 husband.
You have to clarify these things.
Yes. So I'm a lawyer, non-practicing, an arbitrator, and a social justice advocate. And because I'm a social justice advocate, I founded Sleeves Rolled Up, an organization for young professionals who come together to distribute basic needs for vulnerable people. And we also do prison visitations, hospital visitations, etc.
Wow.
And other than that, I love food so much.
Yes.
So
We share
I'm a
that
foodpreneur.
in common.
Yes. So I do catering services. I run a company called Ominous Food and Events. So I create events, I plan events, and at those events I cook. So it's like a package of everything.
Nice.
So basically, that's me. But today, I'm here as a premarital counselor.
Yes.
Which is something I enjoy doing.
I know.
Yes.
I can tell that that's something that you're passionate about. And even when you agreed to be here, I was like, oh God, thank you, because I know that this conversation is going to flow from that passion that you have. So for this particular part of the conversation, I want to focus mostly on sex before marriage, especially because you are a premarital counselor. So you get to engage with brides and grooms, preparing them for this huge step of marriage in the hopes that they will have a lasting marriage, right? And right now in Zambia, we have this situation of so many divorces going on, and marriages are failing left, right, and center. And yes, some of them have valid reasons, but then others of them have things that you're like, man, you could have worked that out, you could have sorted that out. And some of those things are to do with sex, incompatibility, as they would say, because maybe they're too lazy to do the work of exploring their partner, finding out what their partner likes, or maybe they have too much pre-sexual baggage that ends up coming in the marriage and causing, all sorts of confusion and all that stuff. So in that regard, and with your experience, why do you think, so it's a 2-part question. Why do you think, from your experience, that God intended sex to only be enjoyed in marriage? what are the dangers of participating in sex outside of marriage from your experience? How does it affect the marriage? And how does your stance as a believer, your stance as someone who believes what God says and tries to add that to your premarital counseling curriculum, so to say, how has that biblical foundation informed how you communicate with your brides and or grooms?
So, as we know, as a Christian, God designed sex.
Yeah.
And God designed sex to be had in marriage, so that He also protects us from having premarital sex. Sometimes, most of the ones the couples have had to cancel before marriage have had to wonder why they need to wait. And so we had to explain to them. Sometimes I don't do it alone, that's why I use we. You explain to them how God got them. You know, sometimes I've had situations where couples come and they've had sex before, and they had sex with people who were their fiancés, and they broke up. And after they broke up, they even say, it felt like she or he took a part of me. And I feel like the way God designed it, it's also to protect us from these same things. And there's also the bond that sex brings. How can you have it with so many people? So God wants us to have that bond with only people who we are married to. And as a Christian, it's easy for young couples to come and then you counsel them and they understand. But there are also those that are not Christians. And then so you need to explain to them, firstly, not from a biblical point of view. You have to tell them about soul ties.
Which is like scientific.
Yes, that's scientific. You have to tell them about the hormones that sex produces. And those hormones are the hormones that bring about intimacy. So if you talk about intimacy is for two people. You can't be intimate with 6 people sexually. So if you come from that point and then slowly bring in the Bible, it's easier.
Interesting.
Yes.
Wow. Have you, to piggyback off what you just said, have you had situations where you have couples that don't believe in, Christian principles, values, maybe they weren't raised in a Christian home, and through that teaching, through your premarital counseling with them, which is over a period of time, you've had an opportunity to lead them to the Lord?
Yes, I can say 2 couples. For them, we went with the moral compass first. Because truth be told, Louise, you can't have sex in public. You can't have sex in church. You can't have sex in a mosque. You can't have... So...
Is that moral aspect?
Yes, there's a moral aspect. Like, sex is just sacred, I can say. Whether you're Christian, you're Muslim, or atheist. So we come from that point. You talk to them about how... Actually, they actually agree. Some of them are Hindu, and they'll tell you... it's not, in as much as I'm not a Christian, I cannot go home pregnant and say, I'll be disowned. I cannot go home and say, okay, I just had sex. So we use the moral compass, like you said. You talk to them about that, and then they get interested by what you say. Sometimes with quote verses, you say, okay, like in the Bible, they say this, that. The marriage bed should be holy and desecrated. And then they'll relate. They say, okay, actually in the Quran, there's such a thing. And but for those, I feel like they also had some Christian background, or they loved the Christian teachings. They wanted to know more. So as we went on with the counseling, they opted to have the Bible aspect of it. So I thought it was just for the marriage, but as we 2 sessions before we were done, We led them to the Lord.
Wow.
They actually requested that day, yes.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it was easier because most of their family members are Christians. Imagine if it was all...
Yeah.
There was going to be a lot of complications of disowning and all.
Yeah.
So yes, to our curriculum, we add the moral aspect, such that even if I don't have to quote the Bible, the Corinthians 6:13 verses,
the content, you still use the content.
Yes, it's still, sex is sex.
Yeah. Okay, so with that foundation that we've laid, right, even those people that are listening, they can hear your commitment to this stance of sex is sacred. Sex is created by God to be enjoyed by married people. When you are counseling young women, I'll start with the women first. How do you specifically speak to them about sexual purity and morality? Back to the moral compass, How do you teach them that sexual purity and morality are foundations for a good marriage? Like, it's not just, I'm not just telling you this stuff just because I don't want an unwanted pregnancy, because growing up, your parents would tell you sex is bad. Just because they don't want the consequences of that, but really they didn't really tell us the why. Okay. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, sit you down, tell you the why, tell you the biblical reasons, I think most Zambians would agree that was their experience. Yes. So now you have this person that maybe grew up in a home like that, tried to stay away from it, maybe out of fear, maybe they slipped up, made a mistake, and then now they come to you because they are on the precipice of this big new chapter that they're about to start. How do you reinforce that belief that, look, sexual purity and morality are a foundation for this marriage to succeed? This thing that you want to go in, for it to succeed, these two things have to be there.
Okay. So first, when they come, we assess how they appreciate the same purity and morality with regard to sex.
Yeah.
Some of them are already experienced in it, of course, like you said, and some of them aren't. But that's not enough. You need to find out why.
Yeah.
Is it that they did not have an opportunity?
Is it because of a belief they had?
Yes. Is it a belief?
Is it because they think sex is dirty?
Yes. Is it because maybe they know someone who was abused and then they vowed that they would never, is it because a relative was raped in front of them? And for those that have gone wayward and come back, we need to find out why as well, because when you deal with the why, you're going to know where to start from.
Yeah.
So some of them appreciate purity and morality based on their religion.
Yeah.
But some of them, it's just they feel it's morally correct. They're not Christian. They're atheists, but they still have this moral compass.
Yeah.
If you cultivate not having sex before marriage, it creates trust between you and your partner, because the waiting that you did, the discipline you had, even when you're married and then there's a rumor of you cheating, and that's not the first thing they'll believe. They will want to establish. We've received news of a lot of marriages that have broken down just based on a rumor, because it was easy to believe.
Right.
And I want to think that is through the character you portray in your relationship with regards to sex into the marriage.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is that their track record before in the sexual purity and morality aspect
definitely
plays a big part.
Yes.
Yeah. So to that point, what kind of conversations, like, let us in, if we were to be a fly on the wall in a conversation you're having with a bride or a groom, but we can focus on the bride first, because I have another question about men. What would you say to that young lady maybe who has had several sexual partners before her now fiance, and maybe she even has had sex with her fiance, but now she's met you and you're giving her all this information, and she needs to make a decision to maybe put some things on hold until the marriage day, you know? What would you tell that person about what you've just said? The character, the track record, the trust.
Okay, I would tell her one of the stories where we had what you've just explained. And then there's this couple, they are married, and every time there's an argument, it's always, I know there've been more. Why would someone ask that? The trust is not there.
Yeah.
I know there've been more. I know there've been more. It's always that. And it could be an argument on money, and then it ends.
Always goes there.
It always goes there. So sometimes, but I also want to mention, for that young lady who has already had sex before marriage, there's always hope.
Yeah.
That's not the end. There's always hope.
Yeah.
There's always a turning point.
Yeah.
And that turning point, your partner should be able to see it. In as much as you are honest and say, okay, look, this was my past, but now I'm changed. It's you need to show your partner that. That way they can never hold what happened in the past against you, because they've known you for how you've been after you transformed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
So I feel like trust is so much an aspect in this having sex before marriage.
Yeah.
When we establish, they actually, most of them actually say, okay, look, we know that sex before marriage is wrong, but they do it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that way, they'll think, okay, we did it when we thought it was wrong. Then in marriage, my partner
Sex
can
with
still
someone
do
else
it.
is
Yes,
wrong,
yes,
and you
and
still do
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good
So
point.
those are things we tell them we need to curb. You do not need to leave any room for trust being questioned or being broken.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. So on that point, let's move over to the men now, because I think culture and society and different cultures, whether in Islam, Hinduism, Christianity, there's this thing of, okay, sexual purity is there, but there's a double standard for women versus men. So it's more desirable for a woman to maintain sexual purity than for a man. And we may not like say it outright, but it's this unexpected thing that's always there in the background. It's like, okay, the guy can go and have his fun, but you as a lady, you need to be remain pure, so that your husband, when he comes, he will want to marry you. He won't want to marry someone who's been out there, but for you it's okay if, you know what I mean? There's just that presumption. So when you've had your conversations with the grooms, how do you have that talk with them? Like now we're in a session with you and a groom, and we want to hear you talk to them about the trust and all that stuff that you've mentioned.
Okay. For them, for starters, it's normally difficult. So we create questionnaires which they have to answer.
Right, because they're not like ladies that you can have a heart-to-heart with, right?
Have you? Why not? Or why do you think you did? Yeah. And you would be surprised, Louise. I can say half the number would say they haven't. They had, and then the worst part is, it was a conviction they had not to do it. But in a home where they had sisters, their sisters were not allowed to go out. But when they are going out, they would be told, don't forget to use protection.
Yes. You know what
so
I mean? So the double standard is there, right?
It's there. But a sister would never be told, here,
don't forget to use
it's even, don't go out for starters.
At all. You're not going on a date. You're not even going to stand next to a boy.
There. And I want to talk about the stigma that's there. They are there, but they do not speak out.
So they pretend they are sexually active?
Yes, they actually say that. And one of them was asked by their friends. I don't know what they were discussing, but it was like, the point where, and then he just went like, that point. But one of his close friends told him, no,
you
have not. And then he opened up to his friend, because I think it's that point where everyone has to say what, and he was like, that point.
Yeah, what you said.
So it's there. So we have sexually pure young men, and it's so unfortunate that they can't come out
and be proud of it.
Yes. I don't know what we can do for it to happen, but sadly it's there. So we, like I was saying, we do the questionnaires, and from there that's where we get a lot of information.
Yeah.
And sometimes, most of the times actually, they are even as comfortable as getting married to other ladies who have had it, but they are, after they met them and they transformed, and it's still okay. So those are the ones we need to emphasize too, that they can't bring out the past.
What about to the guy who has gone out and sowed his wild oats, as they say, right? He's lived his life, he's YOLO'd all the way, right? And now he's at this point where he's about to step into marriage, and he's serious. He wants this thing to work. He wants to settle down. He's done with his player days and all that stuff. How do you talk to a guy like that about the importance of trust into this now relationship, so that things from the past don't come and affect the marriage?
Okay. First we go with the repercussions of what he did. There are high chances that he'll be comparing, when he enters marriage, he'll be comparing what he was doing out there with what is happening in marriage. In fact, that's the other danger that God doesn't want us to do. You know, he will compare. Hopefully he doesn't have an STI already, you know. So you need to tell him the things that God saved him from. And also the things that he is likely to do when he goes into the marriage, like the comparisons, the probably, and you know, once you start that, you start thinking of the other person, and it's so easy to falter or go astray and just go back to your old ways, have sex with the people that you miss, you know. So you need to, for that one, there's another different kind of counseling other than the marital. When you get to that stage, you need to break out, because there's that thing that you need to kill. So there are some types of counseling that I know are beyond me, they're beyond us. So for that one, we call in reinforcements. Yes, because there's so much that needs to be done. While the premarital counseling is going on, maybe you say, okay, maybe you can come 2 hours before, or you can, if it's Tuesday and Thursday, maybe you can come on Wednesday, just so that you can help.
And have you found that your young men, your grooms are willing to participate in that added counseling? Or do they feel like, oh, I don't need it?
Yes, they are willing, because by the time they are being honest, once someone just lets their guard down and they're honest, that's a first step. And then that's why I said we go to the repercussions of, you know, we're like, okay, it's good that you're here, it's good that but there are some other dangers that we can't run away from. You just can't be like, oh yeah,
we hope.
You cannot. I mean? Yes, that is not helpful at all. So, and they come while they're in love, so and they're hoping for the best. So we've never had a problem where they don't want to do it.
Okay, so to the person out there watching, the unmarried person out there watching, whether male or female, what final words of encouragement would you have for them in this regard? Whether they have maintained their sexual purity up until this point that they're watching this interview, or maybe they've made mistakes in the past and they've engaged in, premarital sex. What would you say to encourage that person moving forward as they wait for the partner that God is preparing them for, if their desire is to get married?
So to the young people out there who have maintained their sexual purity, kudos to you, first of all, because it is not easy. I can encourage you to continue doing that and continue praying and continue loving yourself. Do not be defined by the sex you have or you do not have. Do not choose to be defined by what's happening in society. There are not many couples that I can tell you do not regret having sex before marriage. In my experience, those that have counseled, not many at all. Then to those young people who have had sex and have a change of heart, you've done the right thing too. Please continue reading books that you can about the chances that you had to be pure and you missed, but you've changed your heart. I can say you have kind of like returned to your sexual purity, what they call secondary virginity. I don't know what that is though, but yes. And to those that are still indulging in sex, I can say I do not believe it is the right thing to do. There are so many things that you are endangering yourself. There's STIs, there's a lack of being sure about yourself. There's chances that you are creating bonds that won't last with the people who you're not supposed to create bonds with. So I'm hoping for the best for all of you, young couples, young people,
Awesome. All right, guys, we have come to the end of part one, because there's going to be a part 2 of this conversation, but for now part 1 is done. And my hope is that this conversation has broken the ice in your life, that sex is something that can be talked about and should be talked about. It's something that God created, which the devil has tried to make dirty, but it's a God thing, it's a good thing, it's a pure thing, it's a holy thing, it's sacred. And whatever it is that the devil is trying to bring into your sexual narrative, our hope is that this conversation will help to break some of these things, and make it possible for you to even begin to have prayers about this topic. For some people it's like even awkward. How do I even pray to God about sex? Like, it's just weird. And you're forgetting that He's the maker of the same thing. So my hope is that as you continue to fight for your sexual purity, fight for your return to purity, if that's the case with you, that you have this supernatural grace, that God will just give you this grace and this affirmation that He's with you in that decision. Because our chance to fight whatever it is that we're fighting is a privilege, and you guys are worth the fight.